Hey everyone, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're unpacking something that literally affects almost every single one of us. Have you been feeling this sort of creeping sense of burnout lately? Just a low-level exhaustion you can't quite shake? Usually we just brush it off as the cost of modern life, right? We think we're totally in control of how we spend our time holding these colorful, friendly little screens. But the latest data? It tells a vastly different story. What if that sense of control is actually a brilliantly designed illusion?
Okay, let's dive into this. I want you to stop and really think about the last time you picked up your device. Did you actually consciously decide to look at it, or did your hand just sort of find it automatically? It's a pretty profound question, right? It challenges our whole sense of agency. We really like to think of our smartphones as passive tools, just waiting for our command. But as we're about to see, they're the ones actively managing us.
2,617. That is the staggeringly high number of times the average person touches their smartphone every single day. And hey, if you're in the top 10% of heavy users, that number skyrockets to over 5,427 touches. That's basically engaging in anywhere from 76 to 132 separate phone sessions daily. Think about that for a second. When you interact with an object thousands of times a day, it really ceases to be just a tool. It becomes a behavioral regulator. It's an environment we actually inhabit. To really wrap our heads around this, we have to look at the generational breakdown. Looking at the latest 2025 data, it's wild to see how digital dependency shows up differently depending on your age. Take millennials, for example. They are incredibly hyper-interactive, averaging a massive 324 pickups a day. That's like checking your phone 20 times an hour. They're constantly checking. But then look at Gen Z. Their pickups are actually lower, around 112, but their total screen time, it's over 6 hours a day. So we're seeing this major shift from rapid checking to deep total immersion. And the absolute crucial point to remember here is that human attention is finite. It is a zero-sum game, and tech platforms are literally employing PhDs in behavioral psychology to capture every single minute they can. So how exactly do they capture all that attention? Well, basically by removing our ability to know when to stop. There's this chilling quote from Ozzy Raskin, the actual guy who invented the infinite scroll. He says it's sort of like if a wine glass just kept filling up without you looking at it. In traditional media, like a book or a TV show, there's a natural ending, a stopping cue. That little pause gives you a second to ask yourself, hey, do I actually want to keep doing this? But the infinite scroll completely strips that boundary away. Just like Raskin points out, by making the feed bottomless, your brain literally never wakes up to make a conscious choice. And that infinite feed, it builds directly into a very real behavioral trap. Because beyond just bottomless scrolling, Silicon Valley has basically shoved operant conditioning right into our pockets. It's called variable ratio reinforcement. Now, if that sounds familiar, it's because it's the exact same psychological trick used in casino slot machines. Every single time you swipe down to refresh your feed, you are pulling a slot machine lever. You have no idea if the next post is going to be super boring, or if you'll strike gold with some viral video or a huge flood of likes. That unpredictability makes the behavior incredibly hard to break. You'll just keep scrolling through a sea of absolute boredom solely for the anticipation of hitting that next jackpot. Now, what's genuinely fascinating is the neurobiology behind that slot machine effect. We always hear that dopamine is all about pleasure, right? Well, actually, scratch that. It's much more about the seeking system. Dopamine responds heavily to prediction errors. When you get a reward that's way better than you expected, a positive prediction error, you get a massive dopamine spike. But when you expect something super engaging and you don't get it, a negative prediction error, your dopamine drops below your baseline. And that dip, that's what creates that anxious craving state. It basically forces you to scroll again just to relieve the psychological discomfort. And here is the really steep biological cost of living inside that endless dopamine loop. When your brain gets hammered with chronic, high-frequency digital rewards, it actually tries to protect itself. It does this by down-regulating, which physically reduces the number and sensitivity of your dopamine receptors. The results? Everyday, offline life suddenly starts feeling incredibly dull. But even crazier than that, neuroimaging studies show that excessive social media use correlates with reduced gray matter in the brain's anterior cingulate cortex, or ACC. That is literally the part of your brain responsible for impulse control and attention. These platforms are actively eroding the physical gray matter you need for willpower. No wonder it's so hard to put the phone down. And of course, when our willpower erodes, we fall into this cascading downward spiral. Because human beings have a natural negativity bias,
These platforms heavily prioritize alarming, emotionally charged content. So when you start doom scrolling, it instantly triggers your sympathetic nervous system. Your cortisol spikes, your anxiety flares up, and that hypervigilance easily drags you down into feelings of hopelessness. And if you're doing this at night, forget about it. It crushes your melatonin production, totally wrecking your sleep, which then cascades into social isolation, impaired thinking, and loops right back around into more addictive digital behavior. It's an entire mental health decline, perfectly engineered by design. But here's the thing. The algorithms aren't just feeding you content blindly. They are watching you right back. We are living in what researchers call the predictive panopticon. Your phone uses all these passive sensors to build an incredibly intimate profile of your physical and emotional state. The accelerometer, it tracks how tired you are based on the way you walk. The GPS tracks your isolation. The ambient light sensor guesses when you finally fall asleep. And the optical heart rate sensors measure your stress. By combining all of this data, algorithms in 2025 can actually predict your mood changes with up to 98% accuracy. They know exactly when you're tired, vulnerable, or lonely, and deliver the precise trigger needed to keep you swiping. To put into perspective just how deep this surveillance goes, think about this number, 600,000. That is the number of hours of human sleep data gathered quietly from things like smartwatches synced up to phones, used to train a Stanford AI foundation model called Sleep FM. Just by analyzing your breathing and tiny micromovements while you're completely unconscious, this AI can predict your risk of developing over 100 health conditions. It even has an 89% accuracy rate for predicting Parkinson's disease. Now, obviously, that has incredible medical potential, but it also highlights a deeply unsettling truth. Your device knows your biological vulnerabilities far better than you do. So, why do tech companies use all this incredible power just to keep us hooked? Well, it all comes down to the business model. Going back to Azar Raskin, he hit the nail on the head when he said, "In technology, incentives eat intentions." The modern attention economy practically demands nonstop engagement for profit. These companies aren't just competing with each other anymore, they're competing with human sleep, family time, and quiet reflection. If one app decides to make itself less addictive, they just lose users to a competitor who won't. And because of this structural nightmare, Raskin calculates that roughly 200,000 human lifetimes are wasted every single day just fueling this machine. The good news is, in response to these crazy metrics, a global pushback has actually begun against what experts are calling human downgrading. Researchers are pushing hard for a move toward humane technology. Groups like the Center for Humane Technology have laid out comprehensive policy frameworks demanding age-appropriate design and real protection from algorithmic manipulation. And internationally, this isn't just theory anymore. In 2025, countries like India and Indonesia actually passed bans on social media for children. It marks a huge global shift from treating screen time as just a personal responsibility issue to treating it as a full-blown public health crisis. But while we wait for policy to catch up, the source material gives us a very concrete escape plan based on digital minimalism and cognitive behavioral therapy. Step 1, start using screen time tracking to build self-awareness, because you really can't manage what you don't measure. Step 2, introduce environmental friction. Change your phone's screen to monochrome mode to strip out all those flashy casino colors and turn off all non-human push notifications. Step 3, try a 30-day digital declutter. Delete those non-essential apps to break your dopamine tolerance. And step 4, use CBT techniques. When you feel that sudden urge to scroll, just pause for 10 minutes and challenge that irrational fear that you're somehow missing out on something important. By putting that friction back into your digital life, you are actively disrupting the algorithm's power. It takes a ton of intention, absolutely, but your cognitive autonomy is quite literally on the line here. So I want to leave you with one final provocative question to ask yourself the next time you feel your hand just blindly reaching into your pocket. Are you the operator of your device, or are you being operated? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and hey, I highly encourage you to start that digital declutter today. Catch you next time.